Hey everybody, my name is David Fentz. I also go by Mitch in the Discord. I'm control_freak. I feel like people should connect their Discord handles with the people in person more frequently, so I'm trying to do that. I'm technically still a pen tester. I've been doing that for about 5 years. Before that, I did software development for 2. So that's a little TLDR about me. My talk today is about the Wi-Fi Pineapple pager. And the purpose is for me to kind of do an analysis on it and determine if it's just a fun hacking device, which it is, or if it's actually useful in a penetration test that you would do for an employer for a real client. Because it's important to make that distinction, I think. Okay, a little preface before I hop into this, because I will be critiquing the device. Hack5 put a lot of work into it. They're very awesome. The device is a lot of fun. It does have a lot of utility now. They're still pushing firmware updates to it, and there's a lot of community development for payloads. The Discord is very active. So if I critique a feature that it doesn't have, or I critique one that it does, keep in mind that this may change over the course of the next week or month or two. Also, this is my experience with the device over the course of a couple of weeks. In the after hours of my job, so I probably made some mistakes with it. And this is just my experience with the device. I looked over the Discord, a lot of people have positive experiences, but there's also people that have had similar problems that I've run into, so this isn't guaranteed to be your experience if you use the device. Okay, TLDR, so you can leave and go get drinks if you find this talk boring. Is this just another multi-tool hacking tool like the Flipper Zero? No, and kind of. It's predominantly focused at Wi-Fi, but it does have Bluetooth functionality, and there are a suite of extensions that allow it to have different features, which I'll go over in a little bit. Costs about $300, and what am I actually comparing it against? So on my Wi-Fi pen test that I do professionally, I have 3 separate adapters and 3 Kali Linux VMs that I'm using, and that's all running on a Linux laptop or a Mac laptop. So this is me comparing the Flipper to what I would typically use and see, can it replace that entirely? If not, what can it do? Okay, so what do we actually need to do on a Wi-Fi pen test? The first thing is recon. You need to look at the wireless space. You need to see how the access points are configured. You need to see how many clients are there, and you need to do potentially rogue access points. So that might mean that the client gives you a list of MACs for the access points, and you need to detect access points that have MACs not in that list. So that might mean rogue AP detection, but it also might mean you spin up a rogue AP. So you create a clone of one of their access points, or maybe you create a coffee shop access point that's open for one of the employees to connect to. Inside of that, you would need to be able to do a captive portal as well. Or you don't need to, but ideally you'll be able to have the captive portal up and running for people to put their credentials into. You might need to de-auth the clients that are there in order to force handshakes when they try to reconnect to the access point. You will really need multiple adapters that support monitor mode for reasons I'll get into in a little bit. You need to do reporting. I know that it's not fun if there's any pen testers out here, but that is something you have to consider pretty heavily when you're doing Wi-Fi pen testing or any pen testing, is how is the client going to reproduce this issue that you've discovered? How are you going to tell them about it, i.e., are you just going to say, run this terminal command? Do you assume the operating system they're using? Do you expect them to have this device? Do you want them to go out and buy the device that you used? So you need to think about that as well. You might want to do network segmentation testing or client isolation testing. You might want to assess the captive portal from a web application standpoint, or you might want to try to bypass the captive portal, which might not necessarily mean web app testing. It might just mean spoofing the MAC of a client that's already connected, or it could mean trying to exfil data through DNS. You'll want to be able to capture handshakes, and you'll also want to be able to inspect the Wi-Fi packets at a more detailed level, because there's a lot of different implementations of the Wi-Fi standard, and for some of those, you're going to need to look down at the packet level and see what the traffic is actually sending over the network in order to be 100% sure that you can report on a finding. Okay, so what tools? I already described kind of what hardware I'm using. Well, not specific hardware. There's a lot of different Wi-Fi adapters that you can use. I would say just go out there and do some research and make sure they support monitor mode. But what like software tools are you going to be using for Wi-Fi pen testing? There's a tool called Wi-Fi. It is kind of a script kiddie tool where you say like, hey, here's the SSID I want you to attack, and it will just run all of the attacks for you. There's AirCrack, which is kind of like the OG Wi-Fi hacking suite. It is rudimentary, but very reliable in my experience. There's Kismet, which is very feature-rich and has a great UI, but I haven't spent a lot of time in it. I'm not certain that it actually supports a lot of the like attacking methodology, but it's great for viewing things. BetterCap is similar. If you've ever used the Ponagachi, that Raspberry Pi like hacking project, it uses BetterCap on the back end. InMap is something you might want to use for client isolation, network segmentation testing, but also assessing directly the access points, or potentially, I don't necessarily think you want to attack other clients, but you might want to assess the actual ports that are open on the access points that you're connecting to. Burp Suite for captive portals, which we kind of mentioned, it's kind of like the main tool for any web application testing, although there's others. And for assessing admin panels. So you might find like admin portals on the access points, and it's probably worth your time to assess how secure those are as well. And then Wireshark for packet inspection. So that's typically the suite of tools that I would be using if I'm on a Wi-Fi pen test. Okay, so the device. This is the actual device. You can see it's pretty small, about the size of a pager. What we have right here is actually a web application that's hosted on the device, and you can access that web application either through a Wi-Fi network that the device spins up that you can connect to, or just by plugging it in directly. And you can also SSH into the device that way. You can see here on the web application, this is a GIF, and I've got a couple of these. I'm going to try and do some live demos, but I do have like backup GIFs in case everything blows up. So what actually is the device? Well, it's pretty sturdy. It's just a little computer. It has a Linux OS running on it, OpenWRT, that was originally designed for routers. It's got 2 Wi-Fi chips. It has a battery attached to it, which is pretty small. You can attach external batteries. The USB-C port right now that I have plugged into, you can attach a battery pack to that. You can actually run it that way without the internal battery connected at all. So you can remove the internal battery entirely and, for instance, like plug it into a wall adapter or something, and it'll just run indefinitely that way. And the modular extensions that I mentioned. These are kind of handmade 3D printed extensions, which I don't have any experience with, but Hack5 is producing right now. They look pretty cool if they work. There's a GPS one that would allow you to add GPS location data to your packet captures, which you could use for Weigel. If you're familiar with Weigel, then you can upload all of your packet captures with that GPS data. There's Ethernet, which I'm uncertain the utility of. There's a mesh/Meshtastic connection, which could be pretty cool if you have these deployed in disparate locations. And then there's also a mobile broadband adapter, which is over my head, but if you want to test mobile stuff, that would be pretty amazing, although I'm not certain I would want to only be able to do it on this device. I feel like I'd rather have that plugged into my computer. Okay, so how do you actually use it? Well, there's the physical buttons on the screen. There's the management web application, which is what you're looking at right here. It mostly allows you to just use the device as if you were pressing the buttons, but you can also get a shell here more easily. So this web app does have a root shell that you can connect to do things, or you could SSH into it directly. Like I said earlier, you can do the management Wi-Fi network or connect directly through a USB-C port. Okay, device interface. This is where I attempt to actually do a live demo here. Sweet. So this is exactly mirroring everything I'm doing on the device. It's actually phenomenal for live demos. I don't know if they thought about that when they were building this device out, but it's great because I can just use it live, show you stuff that's actually happening in there, and then you can see it on this web app. So at a really high level, we're looking at the top level UI right now. We have alerts, payloads, recon, Pine AP. This is their name for some of their access point features that they have. We'll dig into that in a second. And then just general settings where you can configure a lot of the stuff in the device. Any alerts? So these are payloads. Most of what you do on this device is done via a payload, which is just a shell script that uses bash that you've written, or you can reference and run like binaries, and or ducky script commands, which is essentially bash that Hack5 has written, or some binaries that they have written to do things. So that might be manipulate the UI on the screen for the user, or it might be some Wi-Fi level activity. But these alerts are actually event-driven payloads. So you can set the device to monitor for specific type of events in Wi-Fi, and then when you see those, kick off a payload to do something. For instance, if you see a handshake, kick off a payload to connect through your phone and send that to a C2 server to start cracking it. Then there's this payloads, which is kind of a little bit redundant because most of what we're looking at so far is payloads, but these are user payloads. So these are payloads that are kicked off by the user from the UI. There's a lot of them, actually. There's a lot of there's hundreds of them, of community-written payloads to do some pointless things, some pranky things. You can play like video games on it. I'm pretty sure there's a Doom port already. Yeah, shocker, right? Or some really amazing like evil portal payloads, which is the easiest way I've ever set up an evil portal, actually. But keep in mind, these are made by random people on the internet when you run it. Hack5 does actually audit these payloads. Darren will live stream him doing the PRs for these payloads. So for the ones that are officially hosted, someone has looked at them. I wouldn't trust that as 100% certainty, but someone has looked at them. Okay, we're going to talk about the Recon UI now. I'm going to go back to this demo. So in this initial part of the Recon UI, you can see we're looking at the packets per second in the air. This device is just hopping through all the channels and then telling you how many packets it sees during that hopping. You can look at the devices per second, the APs per second, and the clients per second. I initially struggled to think of a way that this would actually be useful during a pen test, because I'm not going to report on like excessive network traffic. But actually, if you are going on site for a pen test, you have to be like, Wi-Fi is unique because it's actually, you're dealing with like radiation through physical space, right? When you connect to a web application, you just have to worry about making the connection as stable or something. But like if you're behind too many concrete walls in a Wi-Fi assessment, like that actually matters. Your physical location and space matters for doing the test. So if you're going out to a client location that has like 3 buildings and each one has 4 floors, and they're like, all right, test the Wi-Fi. Well, where do you test the Wi-Fi from? This actually could be pretty useful there. It has like this audio feedback feature, so you can set it up to sound like a Geiger counter. So like as you're walking through the space, you can get some audio indication of exactly how much traffic is in the air at that moment. It can be pretty useful for actually determining like where you're going to set up shop to do the pen test. Okay, now this is kind of what you this is what you would usually see like if you're doing like arrow dump or something. We're looking right now at all the access points around us. So you can see up in the corner, there's this little green play button. That means that it's like live capturing, and you can see that it's actually updating these APs that we're looking at. If we scroll down into this list, it's going to pause, so it's not constantly changing as we're looking through the APs. It looks like we have 6 pages of access points here that we can kind of scroll through. And you can see a little bit of metadata about the access points underneath them. If you click into one, though, it gives you a little bit more metadata about that access point and its configuration. And then you can see on the right here, we have another list of connected clients, targeted payloads. So this is where you can actually kick off the third type of payload, which is a recon payload. So recon payload just means a payload that's kicked off in the recon view, and it'll be given the context of either the access point from which you kick the payload off or the client from which you kick the payload off. So that's pretty useful when you're writing payloads to like be 100% certain that, like, let's say you kick off a MAC spoofing attack or something from a client. You don't have to worry that you like mistyped one of the numbers in the MAC of that client. You know that if you're looking at it in the recon screen and you kick off a payload, all that context is going to be passed directly into the payload that you've written. And you can see here some of the access point specific payloads. You see there was a clone option there. So this is a pretty convenient location to actually kick off AP payloads from, particularly cloning, because it's kind of a pain in the butt to do all this from a command line, and to just have a payload that says, oh, look at that AP, look at that SSID, and go clone it for me. That's really convenient if it works correctly. You can also modify like the scope of your test here. You can see that you can add the SSID to filters into a pool. So this is kind of how you think about your target scope for the pen test. It is a pain in the butt to implement your scope from this screen. Like if you're doing like 5 SSIDs and each one has like 3 AP max, like that's gonna be a pain in the butt to like search through this and make sure you got all of them. So I think there might be a payload already to pull that from a config file that's located on the disk of the device. If there's not, that's something that should be pretty trivial to write. And you can see here that you could, if I click yes, we'll deauth all the clients from whatever this hidden network is, which I'm not gonna do. That is kind of one of the upsides and downsides of this device, is it makes things easy and it does things for you, but a lot of those things are obfuscated. So if we go into connected clients, there are no clients. So let's see, you can see right under the battery, there are some numbers. So that's my phone. Let's pick somebody else to pick on. Or maybe actually we should just look at my phone. Okay, so we can see connected clients here. And this is similar to the AP, so right now it's capturing all of this, and if you scroll down, it pauses. And then you can go into this and do the same thing you did with AP, so you can run attacks on the specific client or modify your scope or deauth a particular client. I think this is kind of one of the best use cases for this device, even though I'm a little bit sketchy about how it, not knowing exactly how many deauth packets it's sending or for how long it's doing this deauth. However, the ability to like find an AP, pick a client, and then deauth an individual client, and then potentially have like your other devices listening for you is pretty great in my opinion. And you can have those other devices locked to the channel that the client is on, so you're like certain you're actually going to capture the handshake, which is one of my big critiques that we'll get into in just a second here. So some of the things I might have forgot to mention, there's one point here that is a little bit clunky in busy Wi-Fi spaces. This 6 pages is not a massive amount, but if you run it inside of my apartment complex here, you can see there's 11 pages, and it can get, if you're in a busy Wi-Fi space, it can kind of be a pain in the butt to actually find what you're looking for. Okay, so now we're gonna get into the types of stuff that you would do. I kind of went over them all at a high level, but we're gonna say, how does this device actually fare when you're doing these types of pen testing work for Wi-Fi? So the first one we're gonna talk about is network segmentation and client isolation. TLDR, that basically means like when you connect one of your computer devices to a network, it should be set up in such a manner that you can't just scan all of the other devices that are currently connected. That's client isolation. And then network segmentation is a similar concept, but cross-network. So let's say the business you're pen testing has like 5 networks and you connect to the guest, which is open. You shouldn't be therefore able to scan all of their IoT devices or all of their corporate laptops or something. You want to make sure that those are all isolated. This technically is not pen testing the Wi-Fi standard. This is kind of a network level pen test, but it's something that I always do on Wi-Fi pen tests because it's a very common misconfiguration. And you're not really attacking things on a network level, so I think it's fine to do this sort of testing. If you've started reading the bullet points, this device essentially has no functionality for that. I tried to write a payload to do this over the weekend, and it broke my device, and I had to factory reset it 4 or more times, and it still doesn't work as expected. So a little learning lesson for everyone that might be considering getting one of these. The fact that you can write your own payloads is great, but they are running as root, remember that. There's still a method I haven't tried of actually like reflashing the firmware on this, but I think I'm gonna have to do that in order to get it working as intended. You might be able to write a payload that uses Linux namespaces. Part of the issue with this is that it's got 2 Wi-Fi antennas, and it's doing a whole bunch of things. There's a client mode where this device can connect to a network, like my phone, so that if it sets up an AP on the same antenna, maybe, it doesn't tell you. If it sets up that AP on the same antenna or a different one, the clients that connect to your AP can then do like pass-through traffic, and all that can go through my mobile hotspot. So when they connect to the malicious AP, they put in their creds, they just get internet access. But one of the issues is that those antennas, how are they going to get unique IPs? It virtualizes network interfaces on the antennas in order to do that, but it doesn't expose any functionality for you to do that virtualization yourself. So all that to say, if you want to do client isolation or network segmentation, you need to act as if you are two distinct clients. And this doesn't really support, I'm sure it's possible, but it doesn't make it very easy to set yourself up in such a manner as I would if I just had two Kali VMs connected to the network. Likewise with captive portal bypass. So how do you know you need to do a captive portal bypass? Right? Presumably you connect to a network and you see the portal on your browser, but this doesn't have a browser on it, so you're not going to do that. And even if you had like your laptop and you saw the browser, I don't think that this is actually a great device for implementing those two things. Like you could write a payload that sends out DNS traffic and then sees if it can get any like response back from it, but it's kind of not ideal, and especially if you're running shell commands or any sort of bash. This doesn't have a keyboard, so you're going to be using a laptop anyway to do that through the device if you wanted to SSH into it, and it doesn't really give you any benefit. Similar for MAC spoofing. Like it can definitely do MAC spoofing, but it can't like go out and connect to the portal and then determine that it gets internet access, and then try to reconnect as a different client without authing through the portal, and then know that it's denied. You kind of need to do this A/B testing in order to actually report on something. So it kind of falls short there. Deauth it's very good at. Like I said, it's quite trivial to do a deauth, although I did deauth myself on purpose originally when I got the device and couldn't undeauth myself for as long as it was running. So this might have been user error, but for a couple hours, if the device was on, it was deauthing my home AP. So, like I said earlier, if there's a way to modify the deauth payload so that it takes in a number of packets or a time, that would be ideal, but I don't think at the moment it actually does that. Handshake capture, it is good at. It will auto-capture any handshakes that it sees while it's hopping. And it will not only just capture them, but it'll actually convert them into a directly crackable format, which is really convenient. Doing that on your own is kind of a pain in the butt, and it feels like a waste of time. Like, why is this capturing handshakes? I want to crack them. That's why I'm capturing them. Why is it capturing them in a non-crackable format? So this will capture them and convert them for you. If you're going to use this for capturing handshakes, I would prefer to use it as the deauth device and have a dedicated device locked to the channel that you're expecting to capture on. Because like I said, this has two radios with an arbitrary number of activities and virtualized interfaces. Even if, so the reason that that's a problem is it hops. There's like a ton of Wi-Fi channels that you can use. These are like frequencies or sub-frequencies essentially. And so if you're trying to audit 5 channels at once and the radio is constantly hopping between all of them, you're going to miss a lot of stuff. You need to be able to lock to a channel and listen in order to ensure you're going to capture something, especially in like a time-bound engagement. So payloads, I kind of mentioned them earlier, but they're really the main selling point of this device. So any problem that you want to fix that I currently mentioned, or anything you want to do on this device, it's going to happen within the context of a payload. I described already what alert, recon, and user payloads are. They're written in Bash. There's 2 types of this ducky script, though, which you'll utilize pretty heavily. There's the pager ducky script, which allows you to present UI elements and also get user input. And then there's Pineapple ducky script, which allows you to do Wi-Fi level things like randomize your MAC or connect to a network. It's pretty complete, but like I said earlier, it doesn't allow you to do that network virtualization, which is an issue. Okay, so this is an old rig from DEF CON. I didn't see it in person, but these are all like old school Wi-Fi pineapples, and you can see how many antennas there are. The reason you need that many antennas is because you need an antenna per channel that you want to capture on, and the intention of this device was to capture on all channels simultaneously, and if you want to do that, you need a lot of power, you need a lot of antennas, and this thing has 2, right? So the main upside and downside of this device is kind of the same thing. It does a lot of stuff for you. That's great. It's convenient, but it also comes with downsides. So with the channel hopping thing, like you're gonna probably miss traffic because even if like you use the channel locking payload to lock to a specific channel, you don't have any certainty that you're the only interface running on that radio. There could be multiple other virtual interfaces running on that radio, and so even if you lock to a channel, it's going to be the radio is going to be hopping between those interfaces to give them like share access to the radio. It handles scope, but I'm just paranoid. I think if you're in security for long enough, you become paranoid, and I think it's a positive trait. How certain are you that it's going to stick to the scope that it's handled? It can do so many different things that, like, if you set a scope in, does that just mean that it's like attack payload scope? Does that mean that as it hops through channels in recon mode, it's going to not listen to the handshakes of other channels? There's a lot of ifs, and I spent a fair amount of time for a couple weeks playing with this device, and it might just be the learning upswing that you have to go through, but it's not immediately obvious if it does that. And with the community payloads, which are awesome, do you really trust them? I mean, yes, they've been audited on a live stream, but there's just a lot of things that can go wrong. If you're running a pen test for a client as a business, you want to be really certain that you understand what the code you're running is doing. And this does introduce like a supply chain risk for those payloads that somebody else has written. Okay, I've kind of crapped on the device a lot. I do love it though. And I will say, when I first got it, I installed this good portal payload. And from the point of starting to install the payload to capturing my own handshake, like with my phone logging into the evil portal and putting in some fake credentials, it was 20 minutes. And that was fast. That's me not having any understanding how the payload works at all. It basically just does it for you. If you write your own payload and you break your device, then maybe it won't actually work as well for you. And that kind of leads to this like reliability thing, which is that if you're intended to be writing payloads for this thing, and let's say you do want to have this for a company, you want to deploy them with your pen testers or something, you should probably have like a couple dev boxes that you're writing these payloads on, and you're running them and making sure they're reliable before you deploy these payloads to the ones that are actually going out into the field. Okay, so summary of downsides. It doesn't run Burp Suite. It's not going to replace Burp Suite for web app testing. I wouldn't use it for captive portal bypass, and also it doesn't have a web browser. Not ideal for network testing utilities, but it will run them. It is a Linux box. It'll run Nmap. It'll run Netcat. There's people that have written web app scanning payloads with curl. You can determine how useful that is or to what extent an LLM was involved in writing it, potentially. But it will do it. It'll use those things if you want to write a payload that handles them, but you're not going to be able to type. That's something. Everything has to be pre-written when you want to use this for testing. Not great for client and isolation and network segmentation testing for the same reason, essentially. It's not going to do packet level inspection. Client reproducibility, I would say, is generally bad. I would not feel comfortable asking a client to have this device, which means you can't take a picture of it. It doesn't do screenshots. Like, what are you going to put in the report to give the client when you're using this device? You need to know that. So it could be good for initial indicators that you need to look at something elsewhere, but you're probably not going to capture direct proof on this device and put that into a report. The last one is it obfuscates functions, which is great for convenience, but introduces a lot of risk. Pros, the event-driven payloads are actually an awesome feature. I don't know of any other tools, like command line tools, that allow you to do that sort of thing. So if you are willing to write some payloads or trust the ones that exist, having the ability to just have this passively sit and listen and kick off event-driven payloads is actually a really awesome, unique feature. It's very scriptable, so if you want to automate Wi-Fi pen testing, I think there's a lot of potential there. A lot of the tools are very manual. I don't think they need to be as manual as they are. And if you want to do some automation, I think this is a good platform for it. It's very discreet and portable. That being said, it does need ventilation or it will overheat. There's no fans in it, and it produces a lot of heat. Community software development is great. The Discord community is like very active. Everyone there is cool. They're thinking about new things. They're doing a lot of work, and it's actually a lot of fun to use. Even though I had some issues with mine, I'm considering buying a second one just because it's like a lot of fun to use. I already talked about the battery life and the ventilation. Here is someone else in their Discord that was also undergoing some pain from the device. I figured I would share that as well to show I'm not the only one. This person cannot connect to the internet, and it's capturing his handshakes. So he's blocked. Okay, that was a little bit fast, a little bit rambly. Did I not cover anything you think I should cover? Do you have any questions? Yeah. The question is, have any of this feedback, have I given back to Hack5? No, not yet, but that's a good idea. There are they are very present in their Discord as well. The people that are like literally building the hardware mods are there. So they're kind of closely monitoring everything that happens in the Discord. So I guess maybe an informal way I have, but I haven't, they do have like a support like function on their website. And if I can't fix it, because it is currently kind of broken, I will be contacting support as well. Yeah. Oh, I'm really glad that you asked that question. So he said, what is the module that I was writing, and did it involve AirSnitch at all? The module AirSnitch is a new white paper that's been published recently that kind of describes some methods of bypassing client isolation on Wi-Fi networks that seem secure at first. No, the payload did not involve AirSnitch, but I do want to do that. That is like, I want to do this client isolation thing, so my payload was an attempt at, it was just very simple. I wanted to spin up 2 virtual network interfaces and then connect them to the same network and then use Netcat to see if they could talk to each other. Just very simple crosstalk. Can I do that on a network? And I broke it somehow doing a simple payload like that. But I think that this would be perfect for also the AirSnitch thing, if it can do those virtualized interfaces. It does work on 6 gigahertz. It's disabled by default, but you can enable one of the adapters functions on 6 gigahertz, the other one does not. Anything else? No? All right. Well, thank you everyone for showing up. Feel free to come up and ask me questions later if you want to.